Hello and welcome back to NearSight and FarSight. I'm your host, Kevin Taylor. I'm here with my partner, Peter Locke, CFP. And, so many of our clients have come to us over the years discussing real estate opportunities, real estate ventures, finding new ways to invest in real estate. And we here in Colorado couldn't be happier. We've seen both the prices of Peter and I's home increases. We know that there's a lot of value in that space, and we have a lot in our portfolios, but we want to find better, more efficient ways to collect income off of those properties, as well as to see those properties appreciate in accounts that are more conducive to the income that they generate and the capital gains that they generate. And so we've spent a lot of time looking at self-directed IRAs and self-directed Roths as being a fantastic vehicle that Peter and I have really gotten behind, and we've also reached out and brought in a lawyer to do a little bit of an explanation about what self-directed IRAs are and how they're going to work. Peter, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Kevin. A lot of clients come to us asking if they can use their retirement accounts to invest into other alternative investments. Self-directed IRAs remove that obstacle from brokerage firms that only enable you to buy stocks, bonds, ETFs, and mutual funds, and enable clients to diversify into other holdings such as real estate and other alternative investments that you might feel more comfortable with. Let's first describe what accounts are eligible for self-directed retirement accounts: 401ks, IRAs, SEP IRAs, Roth IRAs, Simples, rollover IRAs, Coverdell educational savings accounts, and even health savings accounts. All of these accounts are tax-deferred or tax-free growth vehicles that enable clients to typically invest in just stocks, bonds, ETFs, and mutual funds. But the self-directed IRA was created to remove that obstacle and enable clients to expand that investment horizon. Now, you might be thinking, what can you actually buy? What are my limitations? What am I prohibited from investing into? Since we live in Colorado, a lot of people are moving out here. Real estate, as Kevin was saying, has exploded recently. Land has appreciated very quickly. And so a lot of our clients are finding that they would like to use some of their retirement savings because it's really difficult to save outside of retirement accounts for most individuals. And they want to invest in places like real estate, land, private equity, precious metals, limited partnerships or LLCs that they find from friends, family, or different opportunities that, wherever they may come from, that they want to get involved with, but are finding it difficult to find the extra savings to invest into them. Now, not everything is available to invest into. Some might be thinking, oh man, I have a particular gem or some antiques or artwork. Those are all prohibited investment options inside of self-directed IRAs. Additionally, stamps and coins, except for gold, silver, and platinum bullion, and life insurance. Now, life insurance is available to invest into through an employer-sponsored 401k, just not in self-directed IRAs. So, why would you, as an individual investor, use a self-directed IRA? Well, a lot of the times it's to create a dependable passive income stream that are found in places like real estate. Since right now, in 2021, bond interest is very, very low. Most clients are finding that either they're going to take a lot of risk in the stock market or not really have any other alternatives. So they're looking at they're trying to find consistent revenue in either retirement or near retirement, or they're just finding, they aren't having a lot of success with individual stock picking. So they want to invest in things that they're more familiar with. Sometimes they want a consistent income stream plus upside, which bonds don't really offer, and a little bit more control. Now, self-directed IRAs sound very, very good on paper, but there are limits and rules and regulations that you must adhere to in order to stay within the boundaries set out by the IRS. So what did we do at InSight? We brought in one of our business partners that we've used for a number of months now with a number of different clients to help us kind of go over some of the rules and regulations that the IRS set out for us. Jim Morgan is an attorney in the Front Range area of Colorado. He runs his own law practice. He's a certified financial planner, and he has his master's in tax law. What he's going to go over for all of us is for educational purposes only. So please consult with your legal, tax, or accounting professional before and when making any investment decision. Jim?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I've been an attorney for quite a few years and have do quite a bit of the self-directed IRA type work for my clients. A lot of people are surprised to learn that their IRA investments aren't limited to stocks and bonds, that they can invest in real estate, rental property, land, or other types of investments. And a lot of people, as Peter was saying, are more comfortable with that than being in stocks and bonds. Now, the IRS will allow you to invest in alternative assets, although you cannot go to your regular broker like TD Ameritrade or Merrill Lynch and buy those through them. You'll have to set up a specialized custodial account. And from that account, that IRA account, you can buy real estate, you can buy certain things. There are certain kinds of investments you cannot invest in, collectibles, life insurance. I think Peter touched on it for a second. Metals or gems. You can buy some gold coins, gold bullion, but alcoholic beverages, life insurance, and whatnot cannot be purchased. Most people want to buy rental real estate or some kind of real estate investments when they want to use their self-directed IRAs for that purpose. The one difficulty with this issue, with this possibility, is that there are a lot of rules and regulations of the IRS, not surprising at all, that you must comply with. And one very important rule is that you cannot do transactions between yourself and your spouse and other types of people like your children or your parents. Those are called prohibited transactions. And they're set to make sure that the consumer, don't enter into a bad transaction. They're not, IRS isn't trying to be mean. They're just trying to set some ground rules to make sure that you don't buy something that's not a good investment for your IRA. For example, you may live in a home, and it might be a great home, and it might be appreciating like crazy, as some homes are now, but you cannot put your personal residence in your self-directed IRA. Or if your spouse or your parents or your children own a home, you cannot buy and make any transaction with those people as far as buying their assets. It has to be from a stranger, somebody you don't know, or it could be somebody you know. It could be your brother or sister, for that matter. But it has to be with somebody that's not a spouse or dad or mom, and that sort of thing. Like your neighbor might have a piece of property that he might want to sell, or she might want to sell, so you can go over and buy that as long as they're not a prohibited person. That's what it's called when you're you cannot do business with a disqualified person, and those are you, your spouse, your grandparents, your children, and that sort of thing. Your brothers and sisters, for some reason, are excluded from that definition. So if your sister has a home, it's possible you may be able to buy that from her with some guidance from an attorney. So those are the things you have to watch out for. Clients call me up and say, I want to buy this rental property that we like to vacation. We want a vacation in it. And I say, no, you cannot do that. Even if you don't own it ahead of time, you cannot receive a personal benefit from any property that you buy from your IRS, with your IRA. Those are called prohibited transactions. And a prohibited transaction is engaging in a transaction with somebody who is a disqualified person. So those are things you cannot do. You can buy, if you want to buy a rental property for your IRA or so, or your 401k, it has to be from somebody that you are not related to, as far as a spouse and those list of people. Examples of there are other problems that come in with prohibited transactions are you cannot loan money to a disqualified person. Now, let's say you have a set up self-directed IRA that issues promissory notes. You cannot issue a promissory note to your mom or your dad or your spouse or a disqualified person. You cannot loan money. In fact, if you buy property, you cannot take out a normal loan for that property, meaning a normal loan from a lender, meaning that you are under the obligation to pay the loan back. You can borrow in this circumstance, but you can only do it doing a non-recourse loan. So if you want to buy a piece of property and turn it into rental, and you call your banker up or your mortgage broker and say, I want to buy this property from our IRA, you cannot buy any loan, enter into any loan transaction where you are guaranteeing the loan. It has to be purely non-recourse, and you want to discuss that with your attorney or your financial advisor or your tax advisor. So anyway, those are kind of the general rules that you have to do. You can make this a profitable transaction, but you just have to be careful who you're buying the property from. So the easiest way to explain this is to kind of go through a case example with your IRA. And in this case example, I think we've got up here that Ann Doe wants to use her $100,000 IRA to purchase an $80,000 home. And so she sets up her IRA with a self-directed custodian. And that is a specialized custodian that will allow you to buy, in this example, real estate or gold coins or some allowable investment. So she finds the property and she initiates a contract with it by having her IRA buy the property directly. So she submits the contract back to her IRA custodian for the custodian to sign. So what she's done is she set up an IRA with her self-directed custodian. By the way, if you need some guidance on what custodians to use, you might give me a call, or Peter or Kevin, and they might be able to give you some referrals on that. But she locates the property, she initiates the contract to purchase it, and then she submits the IRA contract, or the contract to buy the property with her custodian. Now, Ann is important. This is important. Ann is not the owner of the property. Her IRA is the owner of the property. Her IRA custodian has to look over all the documents and approve them and sign off on them. And at that point, her IRA now owns the property. Ann is a very smart investor. She also leaves $20,000 in her IRA to cover for expenses. It's a new property. She might have to buy a refrigerator, a washer, dryer, or just do some general maintenance on the property. She might have to hire some painters to come out. So when she buys that $80,000 worth of property, she keeps $20,000 in cash in her IRA to make sure she can cover all those expenses. I had one client that ran out of money in an IRA, but she was still working. So she was able to take $6,000 from her earnings for that year and put it into her IRA and continue to make purchases that way. But when you do this, you have to make sure that you've allocated enough money from your IRA to purchase a property, and also money set aside so that you can pay expenses and that sort of thing. And that happens very, very frequently. I usually recommend clients set aside at least 20%. You buy a $200,000 piece of property, you want to set aside, you want to have $40,000 setting aside in your IRA that you can use that money to pay for emergency expenses, property taxes, and that sort of thing. There could also be a period of time where you simply are renting the property and whatnot. So you might need money setting aside to pay other ongoing expenses. Now, that's a nifty way to go, but there's a better way to do it. If you set up an IRA with your custodian and the custodian buys the IRA itself, then you have to wait to get the custodian's approval to sign off on all those loan documents. Also, if you want to pay a painter to come in and paint the interior of the home, then you've got to go back to the custodian and have them sign off on paying the check. But the problem is they charge you for all that. And so that can be an inconvenience, and it can also cost you the property itself, because if you want to buy the property, it might take your custodian 2, 3, or 4 weeks if they're busy to get around to approving the property. And in the meantime, some other investor may have come in and bought the property out from under you.
Yeah, so I'm a pretty handy guy. Why don't I just go in and do the work on my property myself? Yeah, I can replace plumbing. I can change the electrical. You know, if I see a problem in a place that I own and I want to get ahead of it, I'll just go out and fix it myself, right?
Well, no, not in this context. In the IRA real estate owned context, you yourself cannot do any work on the home. because it's considered a prohibited transaction. So that's another thing, you gotta allocate costs. If you buy property, no matter how handy you are, you're not to go out and buy a bunch of paint and do that painting yourself. If the IRS finds out about it, then they can consider it a prohibited transaction. If they consider it a prohibited transaction, they will cash your entire IRA in. So I didn't mention that before, but that's a very important thing to consider when you're doing these transactions. You don't want the IRS to come back and trash your IRA and cause you to pay tax on all that. So you have to allocate. When you buy property, you have to say, can I afford to have a handyman go out or electrician go out and make all these repairs? If I want to put a deck on the property, can I afford to have that done? Because I can't do it myself. Otherwise, it's a prohibited transaction. So a better way to set that up too is to set up what's called a Checkbook IRA LLC. And what that involves is setting up a limited liability company in the state where you have the property, and appointing yourself as the manager of that property. And then you yourself can be the one who approves the purchase of the properties, or buying paint, or paying a handyman for it. And the advantage to doing that is that you can get work done a lot faster than going back to your custodian. So if you've got your Checkbook LLC set up, I'll explain how that works here in a second, and you've got a piece of property you really want, and it's Monday, and you've got your LLC funded with your IRA money, then what that means is that you yourself, as the manager of the IRA, can go ahead and buy it without going back to the custodian. So you get to buy property faster and also less expensively, because the custodian doesn't charge you for any of that. So let's talk about that. When we want to try setting up an LLC within your IRA, it's set up mostly to allow you to make the transactions, to allow you to make the decision on buying the property, actually buying it, and paying all the other costs. There are some problems with it. Sometimes clients will say, well, I've already got an LLC set up. No, you can't do that. You've got to start from scratch, and you want to set up an LLC that is brand new, and I can show you, another attorney can show you how to do that. Also, you need to set up an operating agreement that is not a standard agreement. You can download operating agreements off the internet. Maybe you have an attorney that did an operating agreement for you for another LLC that you or some other partners have. You cannot use those. It has to be a specialized LLC agreement that complies with the self-directed IRA law. Otherwise, the IRS can come in and bust all of that out. So what happens is, when you set this up, I think the next slide will show us how to set this up. You set up you have your IRA buy the or create the LLC. You have your attorney create the LLC. It's owned by your IRA. So you don't own the LLC within the IRA. So you have your IRA, you have your LLC, which is owned by the IRA, and we have you as the manager. And your LLC has to be owned by your IRA. And so what happens is, when you get ready to buy property, the IRA sends money over to your LLC bank account, and then you simply, whenever you're ready to buy the property, you simply sign off on all the documents, and the property is owned by the LLC, which in turn is owned by your IRA. But the big advantage to doing that is that you make the decision. When you make the decision, and when you want to buy a property, you don't have to go back to the IRA custodian to get their approval. You just go ahead and buy it with your Checkbook LLC. If you need to spend money for a painter or electrician, then you simply pick out that person, because you're the manager of the LLC, and you write out a check to that electrician to do all the work, or the painter to do the work in your LLC, in the new IRA home. So it's a lot faster. It's a little more expensive because there's a cost of retaining an attorney who knows how to set these things up. There's a little bit of more expensive up front, but over a long period of time, it's a lot more convenient than having to go back to your custodian and have them make all these transactions for you. But this is a great way to go. A lot of clients of mine simply prefer to do the investments in a real property, or even gold and silver or something like that, or gold coins. And they will set these up themselves, and being the manager, they'll manage it themselves. And if comes the day they want to sell it, then they just have the LLC sell it, and the money stays in the IRA, and they're off to buying the next property. Now it gets a lot more complicated than that. You definitely want to consult with your legal and tax advisor that's very familiar with these kinds of transactions before you engage in one. Because there are lots of ways you can get tripped up. And if you get tripped up, the IRS can come in and bust out your entire IRA. And that's not a very pleasant thing because you got to pay tax, federal and state tax on it. So this is a very workable thing, but you got to be careful how you set it up.
Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome.
It sounds really familiar to buying a stock. I'm not making really day-to-day changes. I'm not repairing anything in the actual property. I have to really look at this as an investment in a property or land and delegate the responsibilities to someone else. Definitely hire help, but there are definitely some better ways of doing this than others. So again, always consult someone before making these investment decisions. But if you are interested in buying something outside of your typical investment that you're confined to at your brokerage firms like stocks and bonds, maybe look at buying some real estate property inside your IRA, especially for those that have accumulated a pretty large amount of savings in their retirement account. And even better, for those in a Roth IRA, let's say you've accumulated a fair amount of assets inside of a Roth IRA. If you own a rental property, all of the income that comes to you is tax-free up to the age of 59 and a half. So if you own a property outright, all of that income that comes to you is almost like a dividend check, but it's a rental income that's coming to you month over month, month in and month out. You can take it all out, or you can let it accumulate in those accounts and have a great sense of consistent revenue coming into you in the most important times of your life, tax-free.
So Peter, so many of our clients, we walk them down the P.E.A.K process. And one of our months is specifically about income, beyond your working years, outside of your employment. So many people are looking for ways to inoculate themselves against long-term costs of living by creating a steady and predictable income. What does having this as part of their asset, mixture do for the success rate in that month and the success rate for their retirement?
I think having a diversified group of accounts and holdings in your overall portfolio is always a healthy way of going about your retirement future. A lot of clients think about retirement and get really scared because of a lack of income stream, or maybe some of those have accumulated, all of their retirement accounts in tax deferred accounts and maybe never really get out of being in a higher tax bracket. So by spreading out the wealth and spreading out your savings into different areas, such as taxable investments, like your savings accounts, your joint accounts, your retirement accounts, the ones that are tax deferred, your 401ks, that when you take it out, you actually pay income on, and your Roth IRAs that give you the tax-free growth and accumulation where you can pull that in. So I think a lot of clients find it to be really beneficial to have a mixture of all three, since we never know what's going to happen with the tax code. And like the last couple of years and future years, taxes are very, very low right now, which is great. But for those high earners that may be expecting or have a lot of accumulated tax deferred savings, next year might change pretty dramatically for them. And therefore, they might never get out of a high income tax bracket, where some of these types of investments might really help. Now, some of these investments don't give you the depreciation like if you owned it outright in a taxable account. So you don't get some tax advantages like depreciation, but you get, let's say you own a property that you bought for $100,000 like Ann Doe did, and it appreciates to $300,000. If you sell that property and keep it inside the retirement account, you haven't paid any taxes on that. So you can really control when you sell that property and when it's a more beneficial time for you. And a lot of clients find that to be beneficial and helpful for us to kind of help them plan that out, not only just when they're maybe in their 40s and 50s, but when they're in their 60s and 70s.
That is fantastic. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, Jim, both of you, for your time and dedicating it to our clients who are interested about this. Where do we go from here? What is a client's first step if they're excited about buying property, owning promissory notes, looking into investing in a private placement in a company. What is the first step that a client needs to be concerned about if today they're excited?
If today you're excited, if some of the things that we chatted about today spark your interest, or you want to know a little bit more, please reach out to us. You can go to investmentwithinsight.com. We put out a lot of great curriculum for our self-directed clients and also our own clients that are under our management, that are getting guidance from us to read a little bit more, to find out a little bit more information. But please do, regardless of who you are and what you're planning on doing, do consult a professional. This is not something to take lightly. This is not something to do on your own unless you are maybe a tax professional or an attorney yourself, because like Jim was saying, a couple or one bad move could really be detrimental to your retirement account. So reach out, let us know. We'd love to help out in any way or steer you in the right direction. If we can help out, great. If we can steer you away or towards an investment or a place to do your investing, we'd be more than happy to help out in any way.